Warning. Listen to this podcast at your own risk. Side effects may include joy, feeling content, illumination, newfound senses of purpose and well-being, courage, realizing you are not alone.
Okay, today on the Ripple Effect podcast, thank you, Rebekah Varnum, for being here again. I took a little bit of a break. And now I'm like, I got a fire lit under my booty after listening to the telepathy tapes. And you were the one that told me, Jen, you got to listen to this podcast. Oh my gosh. And I at first was like, yeah. But then another person told me, and then another person told me, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'll go listen to this.
Universal was like, listen, you have to hear it.
And then I didn't understand, like, I'm like low key obsessed. Like I like you, I think, did you blow through those? Like
I did. Every opportunity I had, like a chunk of time, I was like playing it. We spend a lot of time in the car running to and fro from appointments. So it was like every time it was like, be quiet. We're listening to telepathy tapes.
Yes, same. My kids were like, "Where's mommy?" I'm like, I was in. So anyways, I wanted to, for background, yes, Rebekah's been on my podcast before speaking about, I would say your whole journey with your older kids, your two older kids.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so Rebekah is first a mom, but now I love that you have, like so many of these moms that we're meeting, have pivoted into your natural gifts and and delving into the modalities that's helped your kids. So now you're a QRI, which is quantum reflex integration practitioner, and a theta practitioner. We've taken courses together in the emotional, like a deep emotional and metaphysical realm. And I want to say thank you, Rebekah, because we met in 2019, maybe 2019, 2020.
Probably 18, maybe. I think
Maybe
we met on the
2018.
internet.
We met on the
Yeah.
internet in a
Yeah. TRS group.
TRS group.
And then TRS.
Yeah, and that was totally divine spirit guided,
Right?
right? Like what? I
Yes,
don't know. I
no
think,
accident.
and
No,
then
literally, I was like, "Oh my gosh, she's a SLP. Are you kidding me?" And then you started doing NET and all of that. It's
oh
just, yeah,
yeah, my
so
career,
kismet.
it's so kismet, and I career pivoted, and then full circle moment. I just kind of wasn't even naming to anybody that I was a speech language pathologist anymore, because I was just so frustrated with my profession in the material paradigm and the Western medicine. And it was just like almost like a teenage tantrum where I'm not associated
I'm
as
not
a,
doing this.
and now after telepathy tapes and hearing all of those heroes that are not always wearing capes. Anyway, what is your take on the telepathy tapes? Like, what is it? What
Well,
has it invoked in you?
so much crying, first of all. I just found it so validating, first of all. And, I think we talked about this, the assuming competence. It was a lot of like, I don't know, it's on one hand, we very much like expect regular things and normal things and talk to her very normal, but also like I guess through all like the testing and diagnoses and like PT, OT speech and all the like focus on the physical aspects of, her disability or whatever. I kind of
Just
lost track
let's
somewhere of,
So let's back up.
okay.
Does she have a label?
Yeah, she,
I mean,
man,
and label, and this is part of what I don't like about the
yeah,
profession is in this world, is that we have to have a label to get
yeah,
services and da da da
yeah.
da da. You have to play the game, the 3D
Yeah,
game.
100%. She's got several disorders that are supposedly not connected. Me and neuro don't see eye to eye. Liva had some fairly severe injuries, falls when she was in infancy. And so neuro's like, there's no TBI. Those falls couldn't have caused this. That's not what's happening. She just, has this collection of disorders. All my alt med practitioners disagree. Like when you're that little, and especially we get to talking about primitive reflex integration. Like I was just having this conversation with a potential new client, and I was telling her because Liv's injuries were so young, she never even developed the neural pathways. which is different from like an adult who maybe was in a car accident. They get a TBI and their reflexes come back online.
Mm-hmm.
That's different because you're working with neural pathways that were already established versus ones that have never developed at all. So you develop these like compensating skills. So I think the age of her injuries made such an impact, but she's got an intellectual disability. She's got ADHD. She's got global dyspraxia. So like she's completely nonverbal. She talks and she communicates, and sometimes her approximations are close, like, oh, you just said I did it, didn't you? But she uses a AAC device. She uses touch chat as her app. So
Okay.
we're very much still learning that. It's like learning a whole new language. And we did myofunctional therapy for a while, and that didn't get us anywhere with speech. And then so we shifted into sign language, but then her apraxia impacts that as well.
The
And
growth,
then,
yeah.
so now we're on to the AAC device to try and give her some language. But the telepathy tapes just like lit me back up because I've always been able to hear her in my mind. And somewhere along the like focus of like all the medical things, I lost track of that. Oh, well, she doesn't talk, so I don't understand what you want. And it's like, that's
Isn't that
so
soul?
not
That is
true.
soul
So not
sucking,
true.
and like the amount of hope that gets just sucked right out of you when
Yeah,
you
yeah,
listen to those doctors and practitioners and
yeah, yeah,
experts.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, so what do you think if you had to look, like, obviously hindsight is always 2020. What's been making the most difference for her?
Um, Neurological based interventions. We started with a chiropractor who was doing quantum reflex or quantum neurology,
Yes.
which is like a cranial nerve rehabilitation. He uses cold lasers, and he actually did some Malilo method. So he was the one that introduced us to the idea of primitive reflexes and showed us,
Yeah.
did some testing. And so we started on that path, and we had such gains that I was like, oh, let's find an OT. So I found an OT who was MNRI trained, Muscatava method. And so we added her to our team, and again, more growth. And then I stumbled on QRI, and I was like, this is it. This is bullet. It
'Cause it's
combines them.
both.
It's the lights and the lasers with the reflex patterns, and it has the frequencies too. And I think the frequencies are huge. Like our, our kids, these kids that can't, they're such high vibrational spirits and
Souls,
beings.
yeah.
And so it's like when they come down into the density that is Earth in 3D,
It's too
it's
much.
hard. It's really hard. And
Well,
so I think that's why we see what we're labeling as disability, but what in actuality is just a much higher. It's like, when you're running, it's like you've got old computer equipment and you're trying to download this like huge file
yeah.
and it's clunky and it doesn't work. That's what I think is going on with our kids. And that's why I think the telepathy is there, is because they're trying to show us there's this new thing coming on board. And this physical aspect is not what matters. I
Mhm.
think. I think
I
that's one of the big takeaways.
absolutely. That was a big takeaway, and I've had the gift of working with so many of these individuals, and I remember when and, this was before I had a lot of tools, but so many of the non-speakers are the reason I went and delved into my own personal healing and transformation, because I could tell that I could put my little smile on, like, "Here's Miss Jen, she's ready to play and do play therapy." But inside, I was struggling with feeling very lonely and depressed, and they could feel like my
Feel
energy
that.
was, yeah, they could feel that.
There's no
And
lying to these kids.
no, and it was so sweet because they would feel that and they would give me a
Yeah.
hug, but
Yeah.
and imagine that you can't really turn off all the signals, like, you don't even know, like, what thoughts you're hearing from who, and, like, to be honest, like, my some of my thoughts could be really dark, and they still can. I still can succumb to different thoughts
Yeah.
and feelings, and I've always been super sensitive, and so I started delving into energy healing, different like tai chi movements, and just trying to re-regulate so that I wasn't bringing my dirty energy into my
Part of the session. Yeah. No,
my
that
energetic gunk, because I would be like, "Oh my gosh," like,
they can
it's
see it. Yeah.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
felt really bad, like, and I also, so I was working with an individual, and he, that was the part that I kind of am still dealing with, going back, like, "Oh, we were working on homonyms," like, who
Yeah.
gives a crap about homonyms? Like, it was because the school district was paying for these services, I had to honor the IEP and work towards the
Yeah.
goals, and, we there are SLPs that are working on the down low, or OTs in the schools, and you guys are all, my hat's off to you, because it is soul sucking when you have to fit into a paradigm that is just seems so pointless. But he looked at me and he was like, and I just seen a rainbow, and my dad had just passed, and he didn't know that, and maybe he saw my dad too, like, he was like, he he told me, he's like, you're so sad, you miss your dad, but he's in heaven." And then he started giggling and laughing, and at the time, I think it was because he knew that I knew that he read my mind
Yeah.
or felt,
Yeah.
and so he was giddy, or maybe he was seeing my dad, and my dad's
Maybe
a very
both.
playful, maybe, and both. But I remember having to, like, be like, "Well, so and so, this is not a very this," I'll just call him Johnny. "Johnny, this is not really an appropriate response to somebody whose dad just died, like,
Aw.
because I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was feeling, I was triggered in grief,
Yeah.
so I couldn't see it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, there's all these moments that have been downloading into my awareness of, like, "Oh my gosh, that was what was going on. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh."
No.
And
No, I
having
get that. I've had some moments of guilt too, listening, like again, all the crying, like, oh my God,
yeah,
like that was you just like have these awarenesses, like, oh my gosh, I totally like
I
that
missed
is so many
that.
confidence. I missed
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then, but it was really sweet. I went to see my craniosacral therapist, who is more than, that is her background, just like my background as an SLP, and I'm so much
Yeah.
more than that. Your
Yeah.
background, mom, practitioner, healer, like, we're so much more. We're
Yeah.
multidimensional. So she was working. I said, "You know what? I think I need to really get this guilt and the shame out of my body, because I keep being drawn to not like the positive, because I knew intellectually that all these kids have forgiven me. I showed up with love.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't do the right things always, but I did the best that I
Intention
could do."
matters, and you're not out there operating with malice. And
Yeah,
again, they know. They know
right.
if you love
They
and respect them, or if you're
know.
out there like, and
Yeah,
you're not
and
operating with malice. So yeah, it's totally.
so I was like, "It just feels very stuck in my body. I don't know how to clear it." And so it was beautiful, because she says she doesn't always see spirits, but she's like, "Oh my gosh, Jen, there's all these kids behind you in, like, a
Aw.
semicircle." And I
Aw.
told her about the telepathy tapes, so she's going to take a listen.
Nice.
And it was like releasing the shame and the guilt, because they're such pure spirits and so spiritually evolved, with little to no ego, that I knew I'm blocking myself from. So the reframe was sending out the telepathic frequency of, like, "How can I be of service to you? How can I help you?"
That's what I was just thinking. Doing this right here is giving voice. That is the restitutions, so to speak, is like you're taking what you learned and lifting it so that other people don't have to learn the hard
Yeah.
way. It's like you're spreading the message, like
Yeah.
we're here, and the whole just how advanced they are. It's like they know, they see it. Like we've had
Yeah.
that with Liv. We go into practitioners and it's like she picks up the chart and she's like right
She
here.
did that. She did that. Yeah, I'll never forget when she walked into my office, and I had just started delving into, like, okay, maybe you've let somebody court into you, and they're an energy vampire. Do you feel tired? Like, and there's, as you know, because you have the charts now and you do the same similar modalities. And she just pointed to that, and then, like, looked at you, and I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
get your arm up because I utilize applied kinesiology and muscle testing. And much like telepathy, I want people to know because I'm seeing in these groups that they're like, well, how do I know? Like, do I, and I think it was beautiful what podcast episode where the non-speaker was like, I need this tuning fork for
Mhm.
my spirit, and I need this tuning fork for my body to
Yeah.
help me integrate and get
Yeah.
back in there.
Yeah.
And muscle testing to me is what healed me and my family from Lyme disease and
Yeah.
co-infections. Like you can ask the body,
Yeah.
mind, and spirit anything
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
get
No, it's a
get re-
valuable tool. And if you
yeah.
have a non-speaker, like,
Oh my
yes,
goodness.
yes, it's a valuable tool. Learn it. It's a good way of like, even just simple things like, because a lot of times we're having to make decisions for them. It's like, should I put this in their lunch or this in their lunch?
And you're
It's be- because to some degree their autonomy gets put aside in a lot of situations because it's like, here, I'll just do it for you. So
right.
it's a way of respecting their autonomy and tuning in. And I think it's good for teaching us to be sensitive to their systems too, like
Right.
in telepathy tapes, the kid that was very outside his body. I very much experienced that with Liva, even just when she was born, we had a home birth and everything was fine, beautiful, wonderful. And it was like, as I was stepping out of the pool to go to my bed, there was this moment of where I felt her slipping away. And it was like I had to like call her back into her body. And that's
Wow.
been kind of an ongoing theme throughout is like, you live in this space. It's like in Aladdin, the
It can
genie talks about like,
yeah. Well,
pretty
it's the
limited space.
because you are this soul in this body and this
Yeah.
is your container, but if you don't
Yeah.
know like, I did love how, Akil spelled out, like, that landed and that was so funny because I was like, "Oh my gosh, he needs MNRI," because I had just
Yeah.
gone to a
Yeah.
course and,
Yeah.
like, he was like, "Literally, I do not feel my body, I'm not
Yeah.
connected to it," and imagine the hand flapping, which is
Yep.
is because they're trying to
Trying to
feel
like get
something
sensation. Yeah.
sensory and the neurosensory components, and I just,
Yeah.
yeah, then
That's
I
why I think QRI has been such a big thing for us because it is that it's meeting her where she's at this high because it adds the lights and the vibrations. That if you think in terms of density, light and vibration is much
so
less dense
much
than something physical. But we're also using it on the body and like
yes.
neurologically being like, it's safe to be in this container. There's a
Right.
lot of like, why the MNRI? It's like the touch and like, oh, this
Well, and I
is where
know
my body is. This is
it
where my feet are. This is, she
I had to
random
write
things all
this
the time.
down because, Pamela Curley, she is Dr. Moscatova's, like, secondhand
Yeah,
woman bringing, MNRI to the world, and she was explaining, and it downloaded and stuck for me because you go to these workshops and you work on each other, so you get to feel what the integration is doing for yourself, and, oh my gosh, I'll be darned if I didn't have, like, a huge emotional release
same.
reintegrating ATNR on the left side, which has always been my side that I
Oh,
just
wow.
the
Tight.
expansion side, the
Yeah.
tightness, whatever. So she says why reflex work sticks is once our brain understands the efficiency, the fastest way through physics, it will always choose the law of simple nature. It's thermodynamics.
Mhm.
Nature loves order. So from
Mm.
chaos to order. So it just stuck for me, and I was like, "Oh," and then she also taught me this because I remember learning and being like, "Oh my gosh, there's so many steps," and, like, when you're learning, you get very rigid, and I
Yeah.
lose my spiritual connection
Yeah.
in the present time consciousness, and she touches with love and presence, and it really doesn't matter the steps. I've learned I mean, I probably flipped up, like, some of the steps, I mean, obviously, you know, but I took that to heart and I noticed that matters. And the same thing that the
Yeah.
telepathy tapes will confirm that is if you're present with a quiet mind, then they feel safe to let there's not the clutter, the mind clutter. So many of those individuals are to say that relax. Like, even when there was a speaker that got to visit the hill that they speak about in the telepathy tapes, which was such a beautiful. I was like, wow, this is so great. A
No,
little
you
apart.
haven't tried going yet? Is that what you're telling me, Jen? You haven't
You know what?
tried?
I haven't tried going yet because of I feel like that's their sacred space. But the I was so worried that the wrong people would try to go there.
Yeah.
And
No,
I
I think
then
that kind of separate with the
I heard the divine beings that are protecting that sacred space.
Yep.
I started crying because I'm like, oh, thank God, I'm like, I
Yeah.
needed to
Yeah,
hear
for
that
sure.
um, because me being susceptible to entity attachments through, and this is I help people with releasing
Right.
that. But I was like, oh gosh, this podcast. But I'm like, no, Jen, like they know what they're doing.
They
And
do
you
know.
love,
Well,
like they're vibrating
listen.
too high. They're vibrating so high that there's no resonance for that to stick,
No,
right?
for
Or
sure.
to like muddle it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think I have to
I will
get
give you this because I've had a beautiful experience, but ask to be invited and see what happens.
mm,
See who shows up.
yeah, yeah. And I've loved what's happened with the telepathy tapes because I'm connecting with people all over the world, moms like you, SLPs, and like Akil's mom's gonna be on the tomorrow. We get to talk about like his
I wish
journey.
I would have known because I met her I went to one of the QRI trainings. We were in a QRI training together. I wish I would have known. Like
Oh,
Bonnie had
that
started to say something. We were talking. She was teaching muscle testing and talking about energy and that sort of thing, which I kind of love about QRI because they incorporate more of the like frequency and, Eastern philosophies and things like that. And I do remember her being like, now we're talking my language. And I was like, girl, me too. But I
yeah,
didn't
but you know
know.
what?
And I
And
feel
I
like I
feel
missed
like
the opportunity.
I know, but I feel like I understand like Dr. Muskatova's she so I get to go to MNRI and I
Mhm.
consider it a root cause modality that I can
Yeah,
put in
no,
my
for sure.
toolbox. Like,
Same.
and I can get my continuing ed hours and ASHA
Yep.
actually honors it.
All
So,
of it.
right. So I get that they're living in this. I feel like it's both. And I met up with you before the conference and I was like, oh, gotta go to this thing, but I wanna know the information, but then
Yeah,
it
no,
was
it's
totally
good. It's
not the
valid.
experience I had because Pamela
Yeah.
is like, she meditates, like, it's
Nice.
all these people that are
It's coming online,
walking the
whether
fine
people
line.
are it's coming. Whether people are still
Absolutely.
trying to fight the old paradigm or not, it's coming online. That's why we're getting these kids. You're talking about the chatter. It's like Liv when she's trying to like blah 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 blah. It, but I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. She'll stop and she looks at me,
Mhm,
and I'm like,
it's
oh, you would like the blue cup. It's like she almost has to drop the speech efforts for the mental efforts to come through clearer. So there's something there about
right.
the chatter and the static and dropping that to be in this like 0 point place with people. And that's what you're saying about the MRI, like the presence. QRI is like that too. There's like certain reflex patterns you have to like, go up, but your intention matters above everything. If your intention is to support this child and build neurologic awareness and like integrate reflexes, it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely, and I was hiding out kind of afraid,
I have
and
been too.
like, the telepathy tapes have, like and
It's
I've talked to
it's a
so many
call to
people,
action.
I'm like, "It is a call to action," and it's like light workers,
Yeah.
night,
Step up.
and I know that I have, we all have God-given gifts,
Yeah.
God creator, whatever your word is, source, spirit, we all were uniquely made with our gifts, and that is always been my tenet that let's get you to be able to share your gifts because you
Yeah.
wouldn't have incarnated here in a body that's so I mean, you did choose. I believe that we do choose these
I
things for
believe
our
so too.
soul
Yeah.
growth. So that is part of my belief system. It's just that you wouldn't choose to be locked in that body the whole time and not get to share your gifts. And maybe you do, and maybe then you repeat a cycle. But I think it's like these non-speakers, these light beings are light workers. We're uniting right now.
Yeah. I
And
think so
I
too.
don't even care about Asha. I mean, I'm not trying to wish them to take my
Yeah.
license away, but
Yeah.
I will be of service to these individuals and souls, no matter if I have a license or not. And that was what my cranial sacral therapist reframed for me is like, Jen,
Yeah.
your intention has a frequency.
Yeah.
Like your integrity, if you're
Yeah.
speaking from integrity, that is all that matters. And if I don't have what's gonna help somebody, I'm gonna refer out.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
not claiming that I have some primitive reflex knowledge. I'm not claiming that I'm a core specialist for an
Right.
RI. I just,
Right.
I have some quantum neurology. I've started to put it out there what we
But just
have.
like she said, your intention has a frequency. So if who do I want? Who am I a gift to? Bring these kids that do want what I have to offer. Bring these moms.
Yeah.
Because there are some of us who are searching. We're tired of, like, I've
So
been doing
that's
PT every week for a year and she still can't walk up the stairs. So I'm
right.
like,
Right. Well, and
what
I
are
will
we
say,
doing here?
and
So
I
there
will
are
say that
parents who are seeking.
Sean Paul's mom, Libby, is an
Yeah.
SLP,
Yeah.
and, she went against the grain with
Yeah.
the
I just follow along with
spelling.
that.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh gosh, I don't know. I could get teary-eyed just, like,
Yeah.
thinking about everything. But, as a mom, do you like so that you could help like these special unicorn OTs, PTs, SLPs that might be in the schools or in the system, so to speak. Um, what would you say to them? As a mom, you're not really caring that you don't really care that they don't have like you just want to help. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to ask you? I don't know if you
Yeah.
know what I'm trying to ask you.
Um,
Maybe I'll just send
I
it to you right now.
First of all, they're in there. Like, they understand she's in there. Don't talk about her in front of her. She's in there and she knows way more than her physical body can express. I think that was one of the big things in the telepathy tapes. It just felt very validating. Like, I've said this, she's here. Like, oh, she has a receptive language disorder. I'm like, she understands so much more than, like, because she's seeing a bigger picture. It's
And
like
it's all
those
energy
kids,
too.
yeah,
I like the way that the spellers were able to, like, put into words this happens when we work, like, with clients is sometimes we don't have a word for the frequency that we're feeling or picking up, and we try our best to describe it. Words are a bit limiting, the
limiting.
language limiting. And
Yeah,
then I was so blown away because I was thinking about my meditation practice and I tried so hard to get to like a certain brainwave or into thetas come easier, but into that like
yeah,
meditative, into the void, like where you're no thing, you're no body, you're like it's just the void of
good
nothingness
point. Yeah, yeah,
is so hard, but I think it's a lot easier for the kids that go to the hit like the
yeah,
kids, teens, the individuals,
yeah,
so, like, they're at a different frequency, and so it's almost like this where we're rising up in frequency, they have to come down and meet us, and so what can we
okay,
do to make sure that their bodies feel safe, calm, and not in pain? Because there was a speller,
yeah,
I can't remember his name now, that spelled out that all the stimuli from the outside is an assault, like the
yeah,
sensory
yeah.
stimuli
No,
yes.
I mean, I'm not even. I mean, we're talking. These are kids who are like struggle, so I don't even want to compare my struggles to theirs because they're not
Yeah.
the same. But I tell my kids all the time, like, those your noises hurt me. Loud noises hurt me. It's too bright. Um, Yeah, I think, like, the one kid was talking, he said, "We want access to more alternative alternative therapies, the reflex integration, the
Sound therapy,
cold
sound
lasers, sound
baths.
therapy. I've
Yeah.
been reading a lot about hyperbaric oxygen chambers.
I've
And,
done that.
just the concept of these dense bodies and these high vibrational spirits, whatever you can do to lighten the density of the body. What are you eating? What are you drinking? Are you
It's
detoxing? Do
all
you have nutrition?
vibration.
All of that
Yeah.
matters. And it makes it, when you stack those things, it makes it easier to exist in the density. You lighten it. I'm a big believer in diet, and detoxes are foundational. You have to take care of the bodies. They're already
Right.
in bodies that are challenged. And now, it's like trying to swim with snow boots on. You give them an extra challenge. So
Right.
it's like on our last, so it's just so foundational what you're consuming. The EMFs, we have,
Right.
again, alternative
Mm.
therapies. I've got organite all over my house. I've got crystals all over my house.
Yes.
We shut our Wi-Fi off, those sorts of things that are like, ooh,
And I think it
crazy
was
hippie
and it wasn't
conspiracy
it
theories.
wasn't it
But
Houston that like gravitated to the crystals and his mom
yeah,
Katie,
number one of them.
yeah, was like super, I
Yeah,
think, Christian. And so like
yeah.
crystals have, but I love how we're getting asked to look at our beliefs and the programming
Limiting the
that's limiting us and not
Mhm.
serving us to
Yeah,
its highest and best good.
yeah, yeah.
And
I think Liva's gift is very much in that spiritual realm. I think she
you said
sees
she's a
things that other
spiritual
people
savant,
doesn't.
right?
I
Yeah.
That's what I would think. I mean, you've seen her walk in and be like, "Oh, this is what she needs." Like our
Yeah.
chiropractor, she would walk in and like touch the spots that were out. It's in like
I
point to the
will
touch.
say I
But
will
she'll
say
do
that
that with
yeah.
the crystals too. She'll grab a
Point.
crystal and come up to you and like hold it, and then like, and our current chiropractor laughs because she like, I don't know that she gives her the credit I do. She thinks she's just like
Right.
pretending, but
Playing,
she'll come
pretending.
in and like
No.
muscle test.
I've
She's
seen it
not.
firsthand because and I guess what I've noticed about your special soul, I mean, you have 4 special souls, I will
Yeah, they're all
say.
pretty.
Yeah, and I will say though, 'cause I think you were asking me in the office about the like, 'cause you were kinda going down the school district route, you get
Yeah,
pulled in, you get sucked back in,
you do.
and then you were asking me,
Well,
like,
they need
about
the support
the
because they're
praxia. They do. Listen, they're like, you gotta practice, even
you
spellers, like,
gotta
you
do
have
that.
to start with the gross motor and even, like, I don't even know why.
Well, and that's,
Don't even get me
she
started,
struggles with the AAC device because the
you
gross
have
motor, like
to the gross motor, that's what
it's hard
matters.
to produce this speech in any format. So
And it's
I,
so funny 'cause, Dr. Moskotova, I guess Pamela was telling this story because she's traditionally trained as an SLP, and, Dr. Moskotova, who I've seen videos, she's a genius, like, there's all these geniuses that are downloading, like, stuff to help, right, the collective, and she's definitely one of those, same with Pamela, and, Pamela said Dr. Moskotova was like, "Oh, and all of you speech language pathologists know that you have to start with integrating the hand reflexes and the feet before you
Mhm.
even work on speech," and we're
Yep.
all like, I bet you I could
We didn't
ask
know.
about
They didn't
a
teach us.
no,
But no,
and
thank
Pamela was,
you.
like, hiding, like, hiding out because no, we were not taught that.
No, we
Thank goodness
weren't.
they do teach that in Russia, which
Oh,
is
good.
phenomenal,
I
right?
love that. I love
Um,
that.
anyway, I guess that, what I was trying to ask you is that you're a mom, and so many moms will say, "What? You don't care what helps?" Like, or what
Yeah,
certification, like,
results. I'm after results. I
you're
don't
after
care
results.
what's gonna do it.
Well, I will say that Liva has a frequency where I know she's in there. When you were telling me like that, like the label of intellectually da 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 and receptive
Yeah,
language
yeah, they
delay,
think her
like
IQ is like 42. You look
I
at
do
her and
not
there's no
believe it.
way.
That's what I
You're
mean.
just
Like I just
the
looked at
window to the
her.
soul.
Right. No, I'm like, what is she teaching? I think that's a question that like to ask her, like, what are you teaching mommy? What are you here to teach?
Mm,
Because I think some of these parents are starting to reframe it and
yeah,
giving them that autonomy. Like
yeah,
she's probably nobody's cared to ask her what she's
yeah.
teaching us.
Well, no, I haven't. I mean, I definitely feel like my kids have all led me to growth. I mean, even just in terms of the theta healing and listening to these telepathy tapes, it these gifts are inherent. We have them. They talk about all this junk DNA. Well, what if it's not junk? What if it's just latent? What if it's
Yes.
inactive? And so in theta healing, there's this whole process to activate latent DNA. You go up to creator and you command it and witness it be done, and it is. And so
Uh-huh.
that's one of the
That's
things that
the tenets of
yeah,
the genesis of witnessing and knowing
yeah,
and perceiving that it's happening.
yeah,
Yeah, so Rebecca and I are both talking about theta healing.
yeah.
And
So yeah, I've got a few different modalities and challenges
I
that I
know.
like.
I feel like I'm the same way. I get the information. I have to like
Yeah,
sort it out from my unique lens. And
yeah.
sometimes it looks like the conspiracy with like theorists like in the background with all the lines.
Everywhere.
Like you're like, oh my
I
gosh, like
mean,
but it all but
things are connected so much more than we give them credit for. How am I able to know when my kid's at school that she's gotten hurt before my phone rings and the nurse calls? It's because we're connected on this quantum
yes.
level. And so I think that's one of the big takeaways too, is they're telling us to step up. They're encouraging us to like get with the program, and this old paradigm of, oh, you're broken and you're useless. And it's had me confront a lot of ableism, I think, is what the telepathy tapes, some of the tears are about. I was like, oh, I have misjudged you. And it's like, as soon as you hear it, it's like the lights go out. You're like, of course I know this. Of course I know this. Like, this is not, come on, Rebecca, get it together. But, it's, I don't know, we get
Yeah.
distracted by the material, and it's so
I
much
l-
less about that. Like, that's the slowest vibration is the physical. If you talk in terms of like
exactly.
spiritual, emotional, like by the time it
Right.
shows up physically, it's so I think they're asking us to step into this higher frequency and do whatever we need to do to clear the density and clear the chatter and clear
Absolutely.
the programming and the beliefs and like activate this DNA and let's get with it. You know what I
And
mean?
I mean, to see that that podcast is the number one podcast, so people
Yeah.
are listening. The amount
I sent it to her teachers. I was like, I
my
know you're gonna
inbox
think
is
I'm
blowing
crazy.
up. I know
Oh, good.
I've emailed old clients. I haven't gotten the response back, so they probably full on do think I'm crazy, which I am okay.
No,
Like
same,
I feel like
same.
being called an anti-vaxxer for so many years
Yeah, yeah,
and has prepared me for this
yeah.
warrior stance right
No,
now of not even
100%.
caring. I'm like, whatever you I've been called
Whatever, I've been an
worse.
oddball for 15 years, like, call me what you will, I'm, like, used to this.
Yeah,
No.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, and
But it's
you know what's
hand-holding to the people
funny?
that are just breaking out of it, and
Yeah.
maybe that's some of our role too, right? The
Yeah.
parents or the practitioners that are like, I've had my inbox like, "Wait, you're an SLP healer? Wait, talk to me more about this." I'm like, "You guys are all
Yeah.
healers. You don't know."
I'm going to a new training here probably in a couple weeks, actually. I've just recently been decided, but it's myofascial release. It's John Barnes myofascial release. And one of their lead teachers is an SLP. I was like, okay,
Ah,
this,
okay.
this is a sign.
Yeah, and
This is a
this is
sign.
and I it was a full circle moment because as you know, like, I don't really advertise much that I'm an SLP
Well, yeah, because you've
and
been
I did
doing all like quantum stuff,
right,
you know?
but I had this and both where I'm like, not honoring my past is
Yeah.
not integrating all of me,
Yeah.
and it was keeping it small for me.
Well, and I loved how, to some degree, you were a little bit pushed into reactivating the SLP. You kind
I
of were like,
know.
I don't want to.
Oh, yeah, so
And then
I
that,
had to do a ton of NET to get
but
congruent
then
because it's
it's just
like
broken open with the telepathy tapes. It's like you were being pushed to go back to SLP, but it's like this telepathy tapes came online to be like, see, this is why. This is why.
and it all
This
makes
is
sense
why.
now, like, my journey of,
Yeah.
delving and yeah, I will say that the 3D world and having to pay bills and
Yeah.
whatever, and my husband is finding a more aligned abundance, so I was like, "Listen, um, it's like this for SLPs because they're so needed. Do you have a pulse? Are you breathing? You're hired." So I was like,
Yeah.
"Okay, I could go put my SLP hat back on, but
Go
I
anywhere, but I don't want to get
I don't
rid of
wanna
this other
limit I didn't
piece.
wanna limit
Yeah.
all that I know. And so
Yeah.
listening to the telepathy tapes and they're talking about sound healing and energy and the quantum and consciousness and remote viewing, I was like,
What?
it's like,
I get to
yes, it gave permission to be all of
Yeah.
me. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's what, like, I don't, when I tell people, and I don't, I hope it's like, when I tell people the telepathy tapes is healing me both personally and professionally, it is
Right.
like it's helping me settle wounds that I didn't
Yeah.
even know were still there.
Yeah. No, same. Well, and that word you said, permission, too. It's like, I don't know, it feels free, not more than freeing. It feels like we're being called to action. Like, yes, it's free to like accept this and acknowledge it and own it, but more than that, stop
Right.
hiding it. Stop being scared about it. Stop like,
Right.
be
And
honest. Tell
that's
people
what
the
I
truth. Like she doesn't talk, but I hear her in my mind. You're gonna have to.
deal
I don't.
with
I don't know what to
that.
tell you if you can't do that. Like,
Good. Yeah, here's a class. I know a person, right? I don't know, like that whole
I could probably help you with that. Must
one more thing, when did you figure it sounded like early on you knew, you talked about the
Yeah,
water
I
birth,
we
but
used to
when did you
always like.
figure it out? When did you figure it like, when did you wholeheartedly know that that was what was happening? I mean, maybe
I
that's a
mean,
tough question.
no, literally days. Like I would ask, you talk to your babies. See, people listen, how do we understand our babies and our dogs? If our dog sits there and looks at you and goes, "Oh,
Right,
you want to go
right.
outside?"
Yeah,
What is that? Is
right.
that not telepathy? I mean, how do we
Yes.
understand our babies? So,
Right. I like that
but
reframe.
with us from very early, it was like, that's why I say I felt out of that because when she was little, we used to joke and call her our little space baby. Like she would just look at you and you're like, oh, you would like to go outside? I'm pretending.
It was like a
Yeah.
hypnotic
Yes, she just
stare
like
where you're like,
looks at you and like beams
so
the thought. And then you're like, oh, you would like to go have some juice now. You just like, no. So I think infancy, like days old. Like I remember having an experience with her. I was like, oh, do you want to? Yeah. And it was like,
wait,
I
did I
know this
hear
baby
that?
didn't just say yes to me, but like this baby just said yeah to me, you know? But so part of our story with her in infant, we were RVing. So we were kind of in our own little family bubble. So it was like, this is just the space baby. But coming back and like comparing her to peers and like, oh, this is more. And then you start the doctors and it's like, oh, she's not space baby. She's just disabled. And it's like, no, actually,
Oh, I
no,
feel
that's
like
not
that
true. She
and
is a space baby. And also, her body doesn't work how she wants it to, but like she is still space baby. And like, how
yeah,
freaking lucky that this high vibrational being chose me,
I know. And
Like,
I love
I was,
that I love that we have modalities to work through that. And you
yeah.
came with an intention and
Well,
when
and
when
that's,
when we did a trade where you're like, I want the childlike wonder
yeah.
of
Well, and that's what I said.
wow.
She was leading me back into, like my first son, he's had regressive autism, 18-month vaccine injury, and everything I learned was to like recover him. And so Liva was born into this space of like organic everything, and she's led me way deeper into the land of healing and recovery because she's like, listen, it's vibrational medicine that I need.
Mm,
So the
frequency.
QRI and the theta healing and the NET and all of this has been what has moved her forward and been able to help her body function better. And,
Absolutely.
it just, I don't know, she is still space baby though. So I think just recognizing that and it's just
She's
validating,
a
like, this
yeah,
is
the
true.
quantum savant that she is, and,
Right? Right?
I love your journey too. It's so thank you for
Yeah, of
being
course.
this badass mama that now I just made it explicit. Sorry, y'all. I guess I could well, I have I have
Get defeated.
sometimes yeah, I can delete it or I can leave it because
You
I
can
think
leave it
it's
because
it's
that's not
authentic, and
my,
sometimes there's the F-bomb is cathartic to
yeah.
say.
I was gonna say, and if you're interviewing with me, there's a little element of like, listen, I love Jesus and I am fully aligned with source, but also still dropped that word a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
They leave it in there.
exactly. Well, thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge. It sounds like you've,
Yeah,
like many
absolutely.
of these mamas have, that have been on a journey, have tried just about everything,
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you're still being called back to like this whatever is
It's
going to
frequency
regulate
medicine.
whatever frequency. Yeah, it's all
It's
everything
frequency
has.
medicine.
Mhm.
Yes.
So it's cool.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well,
Well,
thank you, Jen.
where, oh,
Appreciate
wait. And I
you.
was going to say, well, where
Okay.
can people find you? It'll be in the
Oh,
podcast notes.
um,
Like, how do
yeah,
they
you can
contact
go
you?
on Facebook. I'm on Facebook, Restoration Acres, a healing place. And like I said, I do a mix. I very much do the QRI, but also I think the emotional healing is so valid too. I mean, if you learn anything about neurological growth and learning, the body can't learn when it's in a fight or flight state.
Right.
So regulation is like priority. And then you
Mhm.
start teaching the body like, you calm in, then teach it. It's safe here. Here's, like
Right.
you were saying, the quote about the most effective method. So the lights are like, this is how we bring speech up to our brain. It's just,
Mhm.
uh,
Everything coming online and
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think it all matters. So I don't do just one thing. I do lots of things, but
I love
you
that.
know,
Yeah. So
it's the bank. You can choose from it, and whatever you need will do.
exactly. Well, thank you for being here and sharing your
Yeah.
knowledge.
All content by Jennifer McNerney and guests are for educational and informational purposes only. Listeners acknowledge said content does not constitute medical or professional advice or services. This podcast is for private, non-commercial use only. Guests on this podcast do not necessarily reflect any agency, organization, company, or potentially even themselves.